Jodi supports 700 different students getting a job and ensuring most, if not all, have a really positive experience. We're on location with Erin Murdock, who is a student advisor in the College of Arts and Sciences, focusing on computer science at Boston University, and welcome to the Language of Business.
Thanks so much for having me.
Erin, so much mind share used to be placed on that first job after graduation, but right now millennials might switch jobs every 1 or 2 years or even do a career switch. As a result, how important these days is getting and landing that first big job?
You're speaking to a millennial who has done exactly that over the last couple of years, even at Boston University. I think it honestly makes my conversations with them much easier because it's really de-emphasized that focus of you have to find the job that is the perfect fit for the rest of your life. And instead, it's shifted our conversations to finding what is the perfect next step for you right now. So it really does help make it a much more flexible trajectory for them. Maybe we are looking to explore real estate or finance, but then in a couple of years that might shift, or you might be able to merge those two in some capacity. What's great about my role is it really gets to be that learning opportunity for students. So I'm not afraid to have those more challenging conversations around how you should conduct yourself in that professional place and what that will look like. What's also fantastic in terms of resources we have on campus is the Center for Career Development. So they offer things like practice interviews, resume and cover letter review, how to have a good and professional LinkedIn profile. So really fantastic resources overall that I hope all of our students are taking advantage of while they're still in that learning opportunity and that learning phase.
Let's now look at it from the employer's perspective. How have hiring trends changed post-pandemic?
It is my understanding a great time to be looking for a position. I'm really happy for a lot of our graduating seniors. Something I've been seeing is just that increased need for dynamic, adaptable employees that have a range of skill sets that they're really willing to tailor to the job, but don't expect you necessarily to have all those on day one. And then there's definitely been that final increased shift towards employee-centric messaging. So a lot less conversations are happening where it's like, what can you give us? And a lot more conversations of what we can provide you as we're trying to recruit you to join our team.
For students who want a career in high tech, there used to be pretty much two choices, Silicon Valley or the Route 128 corridor. These days, with so many people working from home, are they able to get those jobs in other cities? And if so, which ones?
I think it's been really interesting. I've been seeing a lot of our students moving to Virginia Beach, Madison, Wisconsin, Durham, North Carolina. So places that you wouldn't really think of as those big tech. So smaller cities overall. I think a lot of that has to do with the lower cost of living, especially with remote, sometimes hybrid options as well, or even companies like WeWork providing that remote space for colleagues to still be connecting. I think we obviously are here in Boston right now, so we can understand that the attractive lower cost of living expenses. I think also just the allure of trying out a new city, somewhere new, a new community is really attractive to our students.
Also looking back in an effort to improve the future, traditional computer science students used to focus on Fortran or Pascal or C++. What are you seeing these days in terms of the best prepared students?
I think I'm pretty biased just because obviously I'm also pursuing an MBA. So I really see the benefit to those overlap, both in terms of those coding skills, either soft or hard, but then also those business courses. I think the amount of uptick I've seen in recent years for our students in terms of pursuing those dual degree or even the major and the minor combination amongst the two is really remarkable. And I really think it's only a matter of time until we have that more structured overlap that doesn't necessarily involve them completing two separate degrees.
Erin, thank you very much.
Of course, thank you.
Erin Murdock, undergraduate student advisor in the College of Arts and Sciences, focused on computer science.
Are you a problem solver? Do you see the big picture and the small details? Want to turn big data into big decisions? Take AI to the boardroom. Translate rocket science into the science of business? Build your career at digital speed with a Master of Science in Business Analytics. Be ready for careers like analytics consultant, data science, analytics strategist, data translator, BI analyst, technical business analyst. 10 months and you're in business analytics.
It's one thing to teach your own children how to write and help prepare them for college, but what would it take for you to outsource that to a professional? Our next guest certainly has an answer for that question. Welcome Brad Schiller to the Language of Business.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me.
What was your motivation to start Prompt 8 years ago?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really comes down to communication. So after I graduated from MIT, I went to work for McKinsey, which is a large consulting firm. And one of the things that I realized while I was there is that most of my job was actually translating what companies' employees were thinking into something their executives could actually understand. So in other words, people were just really bad at communicating all of the thoughts in their minds in a well-structured way where they could actually make an argument to other people that could be understood and then could be executed on.
And in that regard, what are the top revenue generating sources for Prompt?
When we started, we were kind of an agnostic writing coaching company. We would focus on anything. And we fell into one market, which is college admissions essays, because people are willing to pay for that, right? There's a high return on investment to writing coaching. So that's our primary segment in terms of where most of our revenue is coming today. But we also have a segment in workforce communication and in academic literacy.
There are so many other companies, Brad, that do similar things. What differentiates Prompt from your competition?
There's a few things that are really important. One is quality. We are turning out a significantly higher quality coaching product than anybody else in the market. The second is price. So we're delivering a comparable or better service for half the price or less of other options. And then the third is really scale. So we do roughly 10 times the volume of the next closest company in our space. And we utilize technology to scale up the experience and deliver really consistent quality in a very timely way that also kind of meets all of the customer needs that we're looking for.
When it comes to the college admissions landscape, obviously a lot has changed before COVID, during COVID, and of course, hopefully now that we're emerging from COVID. What is the biggest and most frightening opportunity for the future of college admissions?
One of the things that COVID did is it dramatically expedited 50% increase in their applications per student. You know, the number of applications are up, the number of acceptances, right, stay the same. So the admission rate goes way down, right? So it's becoming substantially more competitive. And at the same time, you have this move to test optional, which makes it even harder for colleges to evaluate students from an academic perspective. So the role that we play is becoming dramatically more important actually in the admissions process, just in terms of differentiating students with relatively similar academic profiles. But I think long-term, when you're thinking about college admissions, overall, you see this huge shift towards fewer students actually enrolling in 2-year and 4-year institutions because there is substantial work opportunities out there and people not wanting to take on college debt.
Those are the opportunities. What about trends that might be concerning or perhaps frightening to you?
The most frightening trend that I've seen in education is a continued focus on completion over learning outcomes. Over the past several decades, there's been an increase in, high school graduation rate, college graduation rates, and it looks great on paper, but when you actually look at what are the students actually learning, it's not improved or has actually gotten worse in many cases. And that is creating a massive problem for students that are graduating and entering the workforce, such that in the case of writing skills, fewer than 1 in 10 students that exit our education system in the United States actually has adequate writing skills for the workforce. And so this is a massive problem that's affecting companies down the line. But I see very little work actually on improving learning outcomes and actual efficacy just across the entire K-12 and post-secondary education system.
You mentioned a few moments ago that improving writing skills could be problematic for today's high school and college students. What about their presentation skills?
It really just comes down to communication skills and in particular critical thinking. When you think about like giving a presentation, it's extremely closely related to writing skills and critical thinking skills, right? You actually have to structure what you're going to say and you're going to have to communicate that in a clear, concise, and understandable way. So by improving writing skills, you're really also improving critical thinking skills, and that directly translates over to presenting skills. But the key is to really focus on writing and then teaching critical thinking through the medium of writing.
Given the global nature of your clientele, how do you overlay cultural nuances onto essay writing and improving critical thinking, et cetera?
We work with a lot of English learners, but how you structure your communications is always the same. Maybe the words you're going to use or tone may be slightly different. Those are things that people within their cultures tend to know a bit better. but how do I actually like structure my thoughts in a way that each person is going to be more easily able to understand? It doesn't matter what culture you're in, it's cultural agnostic. What we find is that there's a lot of transferable things across different cultures. And then you have to apply kind of these different cultural nuances more to like the tone and a little bit of the style of writing. So the specific words and language that actually get used.
Brad, thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
Brad Schiller of Prompt, thank you for joining us on The Language of Business.
Most students write about the wrong content. It's not their fault. There's a lot of misinformation about college essays, and students don't always know what admissions readers value. Let us help you understand the audience for college essays and what they actually care about. Through our discussions with admissions deans at highly selective universities and reviewing more than 90,000 college admissions essays, we've identified 5 traits that college admissions readers really care about: drive, intellectual curiosity, initiative, contribution, and diversity of experiences. There are 2 great ways to start the process. 1, create a prompt account and use our free guided brainstorm module to identify experiences related to these 5 traits. And 2, work one-on-one with one of our expert coaches. Our coach will make the process easier, help you write better essays, and keep you on track for the deadlines.
Everyone's always looking for a monetization opportunity, but if you're an academic, is that part of the deal? Or if you're trying to make money at what you do, is that crossing some sort of line? Our next guest on Language of Business is Steve Graham, and he's going to answer some of those questions. Steve, welcome.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Steve, you are a professor at Arizona State University and have been extremely successful, either from a research perspective or inside the classroom, monetizing what you've developed. But for anybody who isn't familiar with the academic system or this thing called tenure, if you ever switch universities, what happens to the ownership of that knowledge?
Well, I think one of the things to say right from the start is I actually have a day job, which is being a university professor. And so the way in which I have opportunities to make some money on the side, if you'd like, is through a whole bunch of different kind of activities. One of them is I work with McGraw-Hill or Houghton Mifflin to help them design instructional materials that students use in the elementary schools. Another kind of thing that I do is working at a learning science institute at the Australian Catholic University in Brisbane, and they pay 40% of my salary for my work there during that time. And I get to continue doing the work that I like to do in terms of research and writing. So it depends on what kind of knowledge that we're talking about. Let's say that you develop a digital tool and that tool is sold either by yourself or by a company, and you're getting some kind of royalties or profit on that. And that's developed on university time or developed while you're at a university. Most universities want a cut of that money, okay? And when you leave the university, they continue to take a cut of that money. So when I was at Vanderbilt for about 8 years, we developed some stuff that was commercially sold, and Vanderbilt, till the day I die, will keep their percentage of that. Now, what universities don't typically do, especially if it's knowledge developed on a grant, they don't own that knowledge per se. And in fact, most of the granting systems I submit to, they want you to get your knowledge, so to speak, that you develop out there and into the private sector, whether you're making money off of it or somebody else is making money off of it. Why develop this if nobody's going to use it?
Steve, what single piece of advice would you give to someone who is in academia trying to monetize what they're doing? Now, again, you're keeping your students happy, you're following all of the rules, but you want to begin making money from your craft.
I would say, the 2 biggest things are a very rich and deep knowledge base about the area that you're interested in, because that gives you something that other people will come looking for and ask you about. And then the second thing, don't turn away experiences that help you grow, and particularly experiences where you work with other people, because that gives you the opportunities to learn from them as well. And it also tends to open other doors for you down the road. Sometimes we feel overwhelmed with how much we've got going on, and a really nice door opens and we shut it because we feel we don't have the time. So sometimes that can be a mistake.
When you're teaching writing, if one of your students goes down a rabbit hole that isn't necessarily commercially viable, what advice do you give them?
I usually don't worry about that, to be quite frank. My goal really in the long run is to increase what we know about writing. And what may not look like a great monetary idea initially might turn out to be a great idea in terms of better understanding how writing operates and how it proceeds, that increases what we can do down the road. And so I don't see any new knowledge as being knowledge that we want to kind of sweep aside and let's don't go down that road because you might not make a little bit of cash or green on it.
Why does writing actually matter these days in this tech-driven world?
Well, in today's tech-driven world, we have more writing than we've ever had at any time that I can ever think of. Kids and adults don't think of themselves as writing when they're using various social platforms or they're using Twitter, etc. In addition, thinking is always going to be an essential skill. And basically, writing is thinking. And the better you are at writing, the better you are at thinking.
How about if you are sending out a tweet and are limited to a certain number of characters?
Well, that takes some skill as well to put something in a very succinct form and make it clear to somebody else. And all the different ways that we write have all the different kinds of norms and values that we place on them. But that doesn't mean that any of these are, less important to people when they use them. So, I know sometimes we talk about Twitter or other kinds of texting as if somehow they're not as important as kind of standard English in our world. But when you look at the world of kids, you look at the world of people in general, we use these tools all the time to communicate, to inform, to share, to argue, and entertain each other.
Steve, thank you very much. Steve Graham, a professor at Arizona State University, talking about monetizing all of the interesting research he has developed for 2 decades or more. No matter what platform you're on, listening to the radio, online, or watching television, everyone touts the ease of learning a foreign language. But do any of these actually work over the long term? Well, I think our next guest will have something to say about that. He's only in the pre-seed financing stage, and he already has 30,000 active users. Welcome to Maddie Amin, the founder of LIT, to the Language of Business.
Hi, Greg.
Maddie, what does LIT, which is spelled L-I-T, do?
LIT is an online platform that facilitates language proficiency, language acquisition through digital stories. It's all too frequent to hear people say, I've studied Spanish for 4 years in high school, and I cannot speak a word. And so we looked at that, and we looked at market research and worked with hundreds of teachers to figure out what was wrong. And research and these teachers confirmed that true language acquisition cannot happen without exposure to input that's both communicative and comprehensible.
Maddie, how specifically does LIT actually work?
Well, LIT is a digital library of animated videos. Our team write the scripts under the scope and sequence that we have developed for the 2 different languages, for the Spanish and the English. We write the scripts, our animation team then turns it into animations. We put it up onto our digital platform with different tags. Teachers can come into the platform, they can create classrooms. They can import classrooms from Google Classroom. There's that integration. They can invite students or create students, assign those videos with the post-work activities to students, to one student or several students, truly customize that. And then the teacher is able to track a student's progress, whether the student has engaged with the post-work activities and the video, and so be able to then track that overall progress.
When people learn a new language, they often prefer to read it because the spoken language is happening so fast. how have you decided to go with visual animation in terms of having them learn it as opposed to studying traditional grammatical structures?
In our animations, it's native speakers reading out the script. That's one thing. So it's not a text-to-speech conversion API. We don't use that. It's native speakers. Second is that the speed of the audio is at the novice level. So it's actually slowed down for beginner learners. And then thirdly, in our platform, we allow for learners to be able to adjust the speed of the audio. So they can actually slow it down to be able to better understand it.
In preparing for this interview, we understand that you already have 30,000 active users. Congratulations, by the way. What do you attribute then Lit's competitive advantage to be in this very crowded space?
There's no shortage of language apps and language platforms. But what's happening is that popular language learning apps, they tend to gamify small chunks of language and put too much emphasis on low frequency vocabulary and impart what we believe is a piecemeal knowledge of language. Lit's digital library, on the other hand, offers a wide range of topics, practices, and grammatical structures. And in addition to our post-work activities, our platform is able to provide customization and a robust platform for teachers to be able to track student progress and meet students at their individual proficiency levels.
You also mentioned during our pre-interview that you are pre-seed. When you go into Series A or seed financing, where do you hope that your financing is going to come from?
We are a pre-seed or angel. We recently closed the round. We are a Boston-based startup, and so for a seed round, we'll be looking into angel groups or micro VCs in the Boston area, in the Boston ecosystem.
If you could look into your own Lit crystal ball of sorts, where do you see the company being, say, 2 to 3 years from now?
Well, we are actively looking at entering the international market. So the Spanish product was for the US. We have rolled out our English product for the international market. We recently made a hire in Brazil. And so we're trying to get into the market in Brazil, targeting primarily private schools.
Maddie, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Maddie Amin, the founder of Lit, talking about the business of education and how he is building his company. Thank you for joining us on The Language of Business.
Support for The Language of Business is from Boston University Questrom School of Business. We're also available as a podcast on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get podcasts. Thanks for watching.